Chapter 16. Hail to the Queen. I stood in a small antechamber not far from the entrance to the great hall. I wore an elaborate dress that was primarily a rich, shimmering yellow, reminiscent of sunlit gold with a luxurious satin finish that caught the light beautifully. The bodice was intricately adorned with a black lace overlay, featuring delicate patterns that evoked the mysterious and powerful nature of the drowned god in subtle imagery. The neckline was a modest, yet regal sweetheart cut, framed by a velvet trim to add depth and contrast to the vibrant yellow. The sleeves were long and flowing, made from sheer yellow silk that billowed gracefully whenever I moved, with black lace cuffs that mirrors the bodice's design. The dress transitioned into a multi-layered skirt that cascaded elegantly to the floor. Each layer was crafted from different shades of yellow, creating a gradient effect that added dimensions and movement to the outfit. The outermost layer was a voluminous tulle embellished with embroidered kraken motifs, subtly woven in black thread that shimmered as I moved. At my waist, I wore a wide black satin belt that cinched the dress adorned with a gold brooch shaped like an anvil. The train of the dress was a sheer black fabric that extended behind me like writhing tentacles to further emphasize my devotion to the drowned god. Serena and Alan were dressed similarly and waited with me until it was time for me to make my entrance. Serena was in a beautiful blue gown, while Alan wore dark purples and vibrant reds. While no seamstress or tailor in the world could have created such intricate fabrics in the single day we'd had to prepare, two powerful magic uses, like Alan and I, made the task easy. Alan had made it even more amusing when he burst into a rendition of Bippity Boppity Boo. I'd nearly forgotten the song until he'd started singing it. "Honestly, I thought you would have made this happen a long time ago," Serena said with amusement. "There were plenty of opportunities." "Plenty of opportunities," Alan nodded, "but most of them weren't sure things. And none of them would have kept the right people happy. I think this worked out well." "And it's not as if we were struggling or suffering in the meantime," I replied with a smile. "We had an island the size of Wisconsin to rule, ships to sail, and adventures of our own to enjoy." Serena shrugged. "Fair enough. I just assumed you'd like to be queen sooner." "Far be it from me to interrupt," Tyrion said as he entered the room. "But Maester Paul will be arriving shortly to escort you to the Great Hall." He approached me and took my hands, kissing the top of each one in turn. "You look radiant today, my dear," I smiled. "I bet you say that to every future queen." "I do, actually," Tyrion smirked and brought out a barking laugh from me. "Every single one of them." "Are you ready to be the first prince consort, Lord Tyrion?" Serena asked, her expression catty. Tyrion smirked, knowing that Serena was simply trying to egg her on. They could call me her dog so long as they call me hers. Alan cackled and grinned. "Can't get under his skin today, Serena. He's going to watch his wife become queen. Not to mention watching her in that dress," Tyrion quipped, bit his lip, and wiggled his eyebrows. That got a laugh from everyone. A moment later, Maester Paul entered the room. He was a thin man with wispy hair and an ever-curious expression. He smiled and bowed his head. "My lady, they're ready for you." I took a deep breath and gave him a nod. "Very well." Tyrion took my hand and patted it as he led me to the door. Serena and Alan fell in behind us, while Tommen drew up the rear. Maester Paul led us toward the Great Hall, and Ser Eris Oakheart of the Kingsguard stepped forward to walk beside me, remaining silent and keeping his eyes forward. A guard for the short trip to the throne. As we entered the grand hall and all eyes turned to focus on me, I was focused on Robert. He was standing next to the Iron Throne, his expression a churning tumult of anticipation, regret, exhaustion, and determination. He was ready to be rid of the crown. The question was whether he saw this ceremony as one final humiliation or as a day that would celebrate his freedom from the burden that was the crown. The room was silent as we walked to the steps of the Iron Throne. The three other members of the King's Guard bowed as I stopped at the foot of the stairs. Maester Pole continued up the steps as Tyrion kissed my hand, gave me a reassuring look, then joined Serena and Alan as they moved to the front row beside Stannis and Tywin. I waited for Maester Pole to reach the dais and for Robert to wave me forward. I lifted the skirts of my dress and climbed the stairs. The room was silent as we walked to the steps of the Iron Throne. The three other members of the King's Guard bowed as I stopped at the foot of the stairs. Maester Pole continued up the steps as Tyrion kissed my hand, gave me a reassuring look, then joined Serena and Alan as they moved to the front row beside Stannis and Tywin. I waited for Maester Pole to reach the dais and for Robert to wave me forward. I lifted the skirts of my dress and climbed the stairs. I'd done something similar twice already. The first time I climbed the stairs, I had been looking up at my father's happy face, filled with pride and sadness. The second time it was to announce the Death Caesar and my usurpation of his position. This time, I was looking at a man who desired nothing more than to be rid of the position that he was giving me. I had to wonder how many more times I would sow something similar. How many faces I would be looking up at. How many people would be watching me. How many more till I would be seeing Farron again. I focused on the here and now as I reached the dais and faced Robert. Maester Pole stood between and called out, "People of the Seven Kingdoms, today marks a day of strength. Our king, Robert of the House Baratheon, first of his name, king of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and protector of the realm, shows true strength of character. For the good of the realm, he has chosen to abdicate his throne and pass it on to one who has shown her devotion to the realm all her life." He turned and looked at Robert. "Your Grace?" Robert stepped toward me, forcing me to crane my neck even more to look up at him. He reached up and removed the crown, then held it in front of himself. "I, Robert of the House Baratheon, do hereby abdicate my crown, forswearing all rights, privileges, and authority treated to me, and all inheritances that may have been owed to any relations current or future. I bequeath this crown, and all of its rights, privileges, authority, and inheritances to Lady Merida Oradom." I would have bowed my head to allow him to place the crown on it, but he was so tall that I didn't need to. As the crown rested on my head, Robert continued, "Lady Oradom, you are charged with the protection of the realm, to rule justly, to uphold the laws and customs of the land, to be both just and merciful, and always, to the utmost of your power, maintain the peace between the Seven Kingdoms." Maester Pole took my hand as Robert stepped back. "Lady Oradom, will you take up the charge that has been put before you?" I looked up at Robert, who gave me a reaffirming nod. I turned, my hands folded in lap, and gazed out at the mass of nobles. "I, Merida of the House Oradom," I called out, "do swear myself to the protection of the realm, to rule justly, to uphold the laws and customs of the land, to be both just and merciful, and always to maintain the peace between the Seven Kingdoms to the utmost of my power." Maester Pole guided me to the Iron Throne and helped me sit on it for the first time. Once I was settled, he looked out at the crowd. "All kneel and hail your new queen, Merida Oradom, first of her name, king of the Andals and the Rhoynar and the First Men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and protector of the realm." Robert, Pole, and everyone in the great hall knelt before me and in unison exclaimed, "All hail Queen Oradom!" I let my eyes move around the room for several moments. "Rise!" The masses stood, eyes on me with varying measures of anticipation. "Lord Eddard Stark," I called, my gaze resting on Ned. Ned stepped forward and bowed his head. "Yes, Your Grace?" I smiled gently down at Ned. "I understand you are ready to return home. In fact, I rather understand you were ready to return home before you were asked to be Hand of the King." Ned bowed his head. "Your Grace knows me too well." "I'll need that before you take your leave," I smiled as I held my hand out. Ned understood my meaning and made his ways up the stairs, removing the insignia of the Hand of the King, and gladly placed it in my hand. I hope your journey home is swift and free of worry, my lord. I smiled up him. Ned bowed and turned to make his way back down the stairs before I stopped him. Hold a moment, my lord. We've one other piece of business. Ned turned to look at me, curiosity etched into his features. Lord Robert Baratheon, Sir Sandor Clegane, I called. Robert moved to stand before me. Sandor Clegane stepped out from side of the gallery, confusion and curiosity masking him. He moved to stand beside Robert. With the deaths of Sir Trant and Sir Blount, and the removal of Sir Jaime for breaking his vows, albeit unintentionally, I began as I looked at the two men. I find myself in need of new members of my Queen's Guard. I would name you both to serve in this role. Do you accept? Robert chuckled and grinned at me, nodding. We had already discussed this yesterday, thinking that it might be better for Robert to serve in a position that would allow him to put his strengths to good use. He bowed his head. It would be an honor to serve my queen and friend in the manner. Sandor smirked up at me, the burned side of his face twisting with mirth. Serve the woman who killed my brother and crushed his head as easily as a boiled apple? Gladly. I have no lands nor wife to forsake, and who'd care if I did? But I warn you, I'll say no knight's vows. I chuckled and shook my head. You'll say your oaths tonight once all other business is done. The two of them bowed, then moved to the side of the great hall. I looked at Ned. Lord Stark, I understand your bastard Jon Snow wishes to join the Night's Watch. Ned stared at me, realization sparking in his eyes. He does, Your Grace. I think it would be regrettable to lose someone with your level of honor and integrity to the wall. I shook my head. I would name him to the Queen's Guard as well, someone his age, trained by Sir Barristan, Sir Sandor, and Lord Robert would make for a truly peerless knight, one that could grow into the role of a future Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard. Don't you agree? Ned considered what options he had. Jon was determined to join the Night's Watch. He would fade into obscurity and possibly die beyond the wall while fighting wildlings. While he might be able to climb the ranks of the Watch and may be able to visit Winterfell on occasion, Ned knew this wasn't a fate he wanted for Jon. On the other hand, losing him to Queen's Guard meant he would likely never see Jon again. However, Jon would enjoy the finest training, prestige, and likely be remembered throughout history. What he and I both understood, what no one else in all the Seven Kingdoms understood, was that I was snatching up a Targaryen and making him swear an oath forsaking children, titles, and land. And Ned knew Jon well enough to understand that even if Jon did learn the truth, he would not forsake his vows. I tend to agree, Ned nodded his head. If it please your grace, I will send him a raven with your offer this very day. Please do, I smiled up at him. If you like, you're welcome to remain in the Red Keep until he arrives. I'm sure his father helping him with the transition would do him good. I will consider it, your grace, Ned bowed, then moved back down the stairs. Lord Randall Tarley, my voice carried over the crowd. Lord Tarley, a lean, bald man with a short, bristly gray beard and harsh demeanor, stepped out from near the back of the great hall. He marched, rigid and proud, up to the foot of the steps of the Iron Throne and bowed. How may I serve you, your grace? Your reputation precedes you, my lord, I replied as I gazed down at him. Lord Tarley was a warrior lord, well known for his tactics and swordsmanship. He was a harsh, uncompromising man whose loyalty was beyond question. I have need of a man like you. If you are willing, I would name you Hand of the Queen. The crowd erupted in surprised whispers, but I doubt anyone was more surprised than Lord Tarley himself. Randall stuttered for a moment before regaining his composure. It would be my honor, your grace. Maester Pole took the badge of office from me and moved down the stairs to stand before Randall. My lord, I must ask you to kneel. Randall moved to one knee. Lord Randall of House Tarley. Maester Pole raised his voice for all to hear. Do you swear to loyalty and fealty to your queen, Merida Oradum, first of her name, king of the Andals and the Roinar and the first men, lord of the seven kingdoms, and protector of the realm? I swear, Randall replied, keeping his head bowed. Do you swear to uphold the queen's laws, manage the kingdom's affairs, and command the queen's armies in times of war and strife? Paul continued. I do, Randall said. Then I bid you rise and take up your place as hand of the queen, Maester Pole commanded, and offered the badge of the hand to Randall. Randall took the badge and pinned it to his coat as he climbed the stairs to the dais and took his place to the left of the throne. Lord Tyrion Oradum, I purred with a smile, my eyes finding Tyrion's easily enough. He approached the stairs and bowed. Your Grace? How may I serve you? I understand you've dealt with a great deal of shit while serving House Lannister, I quipped, and we shared a little chuckle. When he was younger, Tyrion had been placed in charge of the sewers at Casterly Rock. He understood the duty for the insult that it was, but put his all into it, and Casterly Rock's sewers had never flowed better. It's true, my queen, Tyrion nodded, but all dwarves do. I need a new master of coin, I smiled. Would you serve your queen by helping to manage the kingdom's finances? If I can't, my father certainly can, Tyrion quipped, and the crowd fell into a moment, chuckles and giggles. I motioned to my side, and he took the stairs to stand to my right. Lord Varys, I called when I finally found him standing in the back corner of the room. Varys glided up to the stairs and offered a low bow. How may I serve you, my queen? By serving the realm as you always have, my friend, I gave him a genuine smile. Only now we can serve the realm together. Nothing would delight me more, your grace, Varys cooed, then joined Tyrion on the dais. I call my brother, Lord Aeron Greyjoy, I said, looking down at him. We hadn't gotten the chance to speak much since I'd arrived for the hunt, but he'd been in on the plan for years now. He'd been allowed to keep the name of Greyjoy since, as far as the realm was concerned, he was the last one, and he had been loyal. It didn't hurt that he would never sire children, so there was no chance of revenge coming for House Oradum through him. Aeron stepped forward and bowed his head. Sister, how may I continue to serve you? There was a bit of a murmur when he did not address me as my queen or your grace. I stood and walked down the stairs just far enough that I was high enough to look him in the eye without having to look up. I smiled at him and reached out my hand, which he took. The same as you always have, brother, I said gently. Advise me. Serve the realm as master of ships, and always remember that I am your sister who looks up to you. Aeron stared at me, gave me a subtle nod. Of course, Merida. I will always be here to serve as needed. I turned and let him take the stairs, leading my back to the throne. I took my seat as he joined Tyrion and Lord Varys. I took a breath, allowing for a few moments to rest my mind before I continued. Lord Mace Tyrell. Mace, offering a ponderously surprised expression, stepped forward. Yes, my queen? I am creating 2 new positions for the small council, one of which is Master of Stores, I explained. This position would ensure that Crown has enough food stores on hand for a great winter. More so, it will ensure that the food is regularly rotated to ensure the freshness of the stores, and that the food rotated out is still good enough to be used. Food rotated out this way would be donated to poorhouses and orphanages to ensure it is used quickly. I smiled down at the man as he put on a show of nodding in an over-exaggerated manner to show his approval. I can think of no one better to be the first to hold this position than the Lord of Highgarden. Would you accept this position? Ah, your grace, it would be my greatest honor to serve you in this manner. Mace bowed low, offering a show of gratitude. Your grace shows great foresight into being prepared for the future, and allowing for the care of the realm's less fortunate. Indeed, I replied simply, and motioned for him to join the others. As Mace climbed the steps, I looked down at Alan. "Lord Alan Amell, please step forward." Alan walked to the foot of the stairs with a wide grin and dipped into a sweeping bow. "I'm at your service, Your Grace." The second new position for the small council is that of Master of Magic, I said, more for the gallery of nobles more than Alan, since he knew I would be doing this. Magic's return to the world is growing, and while it is not as strong in Westeros as it is in Essos, we must have someone who can keep up with its spread, regulate those capable of wielding it, and work to integrate magic wielders into the maesters, so that our knowledge of magic grows alongside our knowledge of all things. There was a slight commotion from the gathered council members of the maesters. I cut them a look that said any protest they might have could be swallowed at the moment. I had already told them of my decision when they spoke to me about declaring Maester Pole as Grand Maester without their consent, and now they knew the reason why. I knew that the Maesters, as an organization, had been working for hundreds of years to stifle magic. Maester Pole, however, worked to learn as much as he could about it. Whether they liked it or not, Paul was going to be my Grand Maester, and I let them know in no uncertain terms that if they did not choose him, I was go through as many council members as I needed to until he was chosen. Alan ignored the council's grumblings and announced cheerily, "My queen deserves only the very best mage as her master of magic. I am glad to accept this charge." He sauntered up the steps and joined the others. "Lady Serena Cowsland, please step forward," I called, smiling down at Serena. Serena approached the stairs and dipped into a low curtsy. "How may I serve, Your Grace?" "I have business with you, Lady Cowsland," I replied. "I am in need of a master of laws. You have proven yourself steadfast in upholding the laws of the Iron Island. I would have you do the same for the Seven Kingdoms. Do you believe you can handle this responsibility?" Serena smiled up at me. Of course she could. She'd been a queen herself once, and the commander of the Legion's forces back in the wasteland. She had more than enough experience. Still, appearances needed to be adhered to. She bowed her head. "If Your Grace has faith in my abilities, then I will continue to endeavor to prove myself worthy of the task." "Excellent," I replied. Then, as I was about to instruct the nobles to prepare to begin swearing their oaths of loyalty, which would take the rest of the day, another golden thread appeared. It flowed through the air and directed my attention to Tywin. It took me a moment to consider why it might be pointing at Tywin, till I remembered something that Serena and I had spoken about. "Lord Tywin Lannister, please step forward." Tywin approached and stood next to Serena, his demeanor as crass as always. "Yes, Your Grace? Now that your eldest is free to become the head of your house once again, he will need to marry," I began, broaching the subject carefully. "He will indeed, Your Grace," Tywin nodded, "though his prospect may be limited due to the recent scandal he was put through. As I have a care for all my family, my good brother Jaime included, may I propose a marriage for you to consider?" I asked Tywin, my tone offering some deference to his decision. Tywin searched me for any mischief, only to find none. "Certainly, Your Grace. By all means. Who would you suggest?" I motioned to Serena. "I would suggest my friend Lady Cowsland. She has only recently come into her nobility, it is true, but she has lands on the Iron Island, is a capable woman whose loyalty I cannot question, and is quite beautiful. I believe she would make for a fine wife for Sir Jaime, a good daughter to you, and a good sister to me." That last addition was the most important. It was I who had seen to ennobling Serena. I had just named her Master of Laws. Marrying her into House Lannister meant that Lannisters would have 2 seats on the small council, and technically 1 on the Iron Throne. His grandchildren through Tyrion would be royalty, and his grandchildren through Jaime would have claim to lands in the Iron Islands as well. Serena was also likely the only woman who would gladly marry Jaime after the scandal with Cersei. While typically the bride's family would need to pay a dowry to the groom's family, the situation with Jamie would likely mean that Tywin would need to pay a dowry to convince a family to marry their daughter to his son. If he agreed to the match, he wouldn't have to concern himself with a dowry or someone whose family would bother him about the whole debacle. It'd also mean he would have influence with the small council through Jaime. Tywin looked at Serena, who kept calm and simply bowed her head to him. Then he returned his gaze to me. "I believe this would be an acceptable match, Your Grace." "Excellent," I smiled wide. I didn't need to ask Serena if this was something she wanted, because it had been her idea to begin with. Serena curtsied to Tywin. "I will do my best to be a worthy wife to your son, my lord." With that, she climbed the steps to join the rest of the small council. The rest of the day was a slog. Every noble family in the Great Hall, as well as dozens of knights, took turns swearing their allegiance to me as their new queen. Robert and Sandor's vows were wonderfully brief by comparison. Stannis was pleased to now be the de facto head of House Baratheon and assured me that he would keep Renly in line. I wasn't concerned about Renly, however, because the only house he might have turned to for support was now comfortably in my pocket, now that Mace was my master of stores. With my power established, oaths sworn, council chosen, and Queensguard filled, I was finally able to start my work of improving the Seven Kingdoms and preparing them for the upcoming challenges of Ice and Fire.